Second, I'm asking you as the White House senior policy advisor. The president made a statement saying he was the victim of voter fraud. People being bused from Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Do you have any evidence?
If this is an issue that interests you, then we can talk about it more in the future. And we now have our governance beginning to get stood up, but we have a Department of Justice and we have more officials. And the issue of voter fraud is something we're going to be looking at very seriously and very hard.
Christina?
This is egregious. We have a child who is lying to the media, and I think it's really up to the media to make sure that they limit these conversations, right? Why is the media responding to Donald tweets as though they communication? We need to demand that this president actually stands up in front of the American people and presents a cogent, long-term argument and vision for this country. 140 characters is not enough. He cannot just make up facts and tweets and then actually have people make the rounds on the weekend shows to try and justify sort of the figments of his imagination. There was no voter fraud. If anything in this country, we need more people to vote. This is not a case where people were being bussed in. And now we're seeing Republican members of Congress sort of saying that, oh, well, the protesters were bussed in, you know, to sort of yell at me about the ACA. This is wholly made up, and it's actually not just up to the media, but other electeds to call their colleagues out to say that we do not have an issue of voter fraud. Right. Yes, there are a few people who are registered in 2 states. Most of them happen to be in the Trump administration, right? But we do not have people who are going town by town voting in multiple elections.
Right. Look, we fact-checked this, Joan. There is not evidence of this kind of voter fraud. The White House keeps bringing it up.
Right.
There's also politically a weird thing here where Stephen Miller, I'm just looking at the transcript, says, look, if this is an issue that interests you, we can talk about it more. It's like, we're talking about it right now.
Right.
It was like last week, Donald Trump lost a federal court hearing, and then he said, well, I'll see you in court. And it was like, you have been seen.
Court. Yeah. No, it's going to go on, and Christina's right. It's really on us to fact check, and I think even maybe turn away some of these spokespeople and policy advisors who consistently lie. I mean, to their credit tonight, Ari, we had the Republican former Attorney General of New Hampshire and top GOP party leaders in New Hampshire saying this is not true. There were no buses. So people in that state who pride themselves on running clean and fair elections are saying there's no evidence, even on the Republican side. We need to see more of that from Republicans in Congress.
Maria, you wanted to get in?
Well, yeah, and I mean, the fact that Mitch McConnell himself said that he was not going to weigh in and do any sort of investigation or oversight on this fraud allegation speaks volumes. But I want to pose, and Ari, I know that you and I have had this conversation before, but basically what the Donald Trump administration is trying to do is create a sense of insecurity across all our institutions, whether it is this idea of the sanctity of voting, whether we're talking about the media, whether it's undermining our federal judges. And we have to make sure that we do not fall into those traps where we become callous, 2, we believe it's business as usual, and 3, we actually let him get away with it.
I agree 1,000%. As someone who teaches intro to politics, right? The foundation of our American democracy has not just long-standing history, but we have to also believe in it so that we can behave in a particular way. We have to believe in the separation of powers so that we can hold our members of Congress accountable to how they'll put a check on the presidency. We also have to believe that we have a fair and relatively independent judiciary that will check the president when need be. So this is the triangle, right? And the media sometimes makes it a square, and so I've already explained that they need to do their job.
You're saying I'm being a bad square?
No.
Bad square.
We need to be a very strong square, Ari, a strong square.
This is the time where, you know, when people have always asked themselves, well, what would I do, you know, in the civil rights movement, or what would I do when Hitler's terrorizing Europe? It's like, this is the time, right? No time like the present. We have a president who is literally trying to undermine every single value of American democracy, and we're still waiting to see his taxes. Well, we're still waiting to hear from Melania about
I think it goes further. I think it goes to a step further. I mean, the fact that right now there are families that are physically being disrupted and turned apart in the last week because of these silent immigration raids that are happening, because they are raids where they are coming into people's homes in the early evening or early morning when people are disoriented. They are real cases that, because they're happening though under the radar, most folks don't realize that it's disrupting. 16 million American families live in mixed status households. When we're talking about a presidency that does not care about holding this idea of putting keeping families together and going willy-nilly, giving people blanket authority in the ICE agency to go after those, because that's basically what's happening. Is that, yes, it may not be his exact executive order, but by him voicing it, he has parts of the agency of ICE which had started really deteriorating under the Obama administration, he who inherited it from Bush, where people are kind of like renegades. They're like literally the Wild West, and that is what we're seeing right now, because again, it may not be the letter of the law of the executive order, but it's basically giving a wink to ICE saying, do as you will.
Maria Teresa Kumar, thank you for joining Christina Greer and Joan